Hi, my name is Brian Latina. I'll be the host tonight for Meet the Candidate with Laura Merrill. Laura is one of our two candidates, non-incumbent candidates for selectmen. And I have the distinct honor of welcoming Laura to the table here at the Parker School cable TV station, and I'd like the opportunity for her to introduce herself and maybe just have a conversation. Laura?
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for sitting here with me and help me out here and introduce myself to the candidates. My name is Laura Merrill, and I am a 20-year resident of Chelmsford. I grew up in Shrewsbury, and I looked to, when I was looking for a place to buy a home and raise a family, Chelmsford was an affordable community that really attracted me because of the schools, the open spaces, and it had a lot of amenities as well.
Mm-hmm. When did you come to Chelmsford? I know I came in '93, and it seems like forever now.
I know. I was a couple of years after 1995, and I bought a house in North Chelmsford, and I've been in the same home since then.
Mm-hmm. And you're a town meeting rep, as I am.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
This is my second term as town meeting rep. I find the whole process has been a lot of fun, and I wish that more residents would get more involved with that because, as you know, there aren't enough town meeting reps to fill all the vacancies, but it's a really important part of our process because it's one of the few places that you do have a vote as a Chelmsford resident.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you get up and speak at the microphone. Sometimes first year town meeting reps are too shy, but you weren't.
Oh, I was,
Yeah.
and if you look at those old clips, you can see how painfully nervous I was to get up there, but I just, sitting there and being part of the process, I realized that I needed to get out of my seat and really get into the process and to say what I felt was important for the residents that I represent.
Mm-hmm. And you learned asking questions. That was something I appreciated. I know that you're cost conscious, as I am, and you ask some probing questions, which I thought were pretty neat. Sometimes I feel like I have to get up and ask lots of questions, and it was always pleasant to have someone else ask the same kind.
Well, I think asking questions is a very important part of the process. I don't arrive at town meeting knowing how I'm going to vote for every article. I do my research ahead of time, and I usually do have a list of questions that I want answered before I'm going to finalize my vote.
Mm-hmm. So you make some decisions arguably on the fly based on some of the information that's being passed at town meeting, which I think is important.
I think it is, because the town meeting is one of the first times you get to hear all sides of the story, and it's really important to hear all sides before you proceed with a decision. Again, a lot of people already have their mind made up when they get there, and I find the process of asking questions and hearing how the speakers respond, as well as how the residents respond to these questions, I think it's really helpful to me.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, you're running for selectman.
Yes.
There are 4 candidates, and the election is April 7th?
Yes, it is.
Tuesday, April 7th.
Just 1 week away.
A week away from the taping. Can you describe your qualifications for being selectman? Is it just because you're a resident? Do you know everything about the town?
I don't know everything about the town, and it takes a lot to be that person. I've met a lot of residents that have been here for decades and involved with politics for many years, and they still don't know everything about the town. My qualifications start from being a fresh voice and an independent thinker coming into the process, not really having direct experience in the town. I make up for because I am a business solutions developer. What I do in my company is work with every single one of the departments to identify what their business requirements are, how they work together, even when these groups don't understand that they're working together a lot of the time, and to put together programs and applications and policies that will help us achieve our goals within the existing budget.
That sounds to me like a Board of Selectmen member. I heard you in one of the debates describe yourself as a Yankee spender or Yankee thrift, something like that. Can you expand on that a little bit? What does that mean?
I think it's very important to live within one's means. I was taught from a very young age that it's important to have a budget, to understand what you can afford in that budget. And being a Yankee spender means it doesn't mean you can't have all this great stuff. It means that you need to prioritize what you want and how you can get it, and you may need to make some sacrifices for other things. Mm-hmm. Another part of being a Yankee spender means that when you buy something, you expect it to last, and you expect to have the funds to maintain it over that time.
Maintenance has always been a problem in town. I know when the school system was looking at rebuilding the high school, and it was a tremendous, multi-millions of dollars. And I sat back and said, every 30 years, if we replace the high school, shouldn't we, instead of spending $30 million every 30 years, shouldn't we spend $1 million a year in maintenance or less? You know, yeah. Is that, would you support maintenance budgets that maybe have a little more money in them?
I would. I think that if I would have to see what we were spending the money on and really see the whole plan. But I think it is important to have maintenance budgets and not plan to replace stuff every time that something gets broken. The other thing is that a lot of the new projects that we have put in place have contingency budgets that the plan was that this will sustain all of the expenses going forward. And I'd like to see some transparency on what these plans are. Examples being the energy project that we put in. There were a lot of promises at the time that the energy savings would actually be used to pay for the $18 million long-term debt. And I would like to make sure that we're on track for that. I'd like some very regular reporting presented to town meeting, because if it turns out that we are not on track, we're going to have to scramble and find funds, and I don't want to, be having to do that and then find out we have other projects that we thought we were going to be able to fund completely down the line.
Well, one of my neighbors, regarding the energy program, one of my neighbors called and said that they were contacted by an energy committee, which I'm not sure that I caught that one. And there was someone who we hired, an energy manager of some sort that we hired, and I'll bet that's not in that $18 million number that we were presented at town meeting. So we hired a person, and for the next 20 years, I would argue that we would be paying the salary and pension and benefits. So we probably need to add a few more $1 million. People
Right.
cost a lot of money.
I'd like to see how that worked into the budget, and again, if we're going to need to find other revenue sources to pay for that $18 million.
Tell me about open spaces. You have kind of a love for open spaces, but I know that I voted yes for buying a piece of property that was made available, and one of the critiques at the debate was that you voted no. And I could have gone either way, but I thought, I knew the property and I kind of drove by it, and I liked driving by the empty space. And I wasn't sure how open space works with your thought process.
Actually, my first love is probably open space. I find that Chelmsford has a lot of hidden gems with their open space, and yet, again, my concern is that you can have so much, and then you have to pay for what you need.
It goes into that Yankee thrift.
It really does.
Concept.
We can have, how many properties can we afford and still make our needs budget and not lose services? And I would like to see how we should inventory all of the properties that we have, how we're maintaining them, and try to get all the different groups that are working on these projects working together a little better. I think that over the last couple of years there's been a little bit of discord. There's been some new people coming in to deal with open space. There's been, you know, the other people that have been doing this for years, and I'd like to see everybody working together on this, because we have so many beautiful lands that I don't think we need to fight over it, but we need to take care of it and protect that.
Okay, and different topic, I guess similar topic. Why'd you decide to run for selectman? It's kind of a big jump from town meeting rep.
It really is. I guess similar to the reason for why I joined town meeting, I realized I didn't have a vote that could really impact the course of where we were going. And after 4 years as the town meeting rep, I realized that that still falls short of where I want to be to try to direct the course of this town. It's been very frustrating for me sitting in town meeting and seeing how much spending is going on, and I don't necessarily think that that level of spending is representative of what the residents really want.
Okay, so spending is directly related to taxes. Where do you sit in terms of taxes? Are we affordable? Are we sustainable? Maybe expand a little bit on the tax side. Are we taking enough money from our taxpayers?
Well,
should we take more?
It's always a hard question. You know, you have a great town with a lot of services that you want to provide the residents, but what I've been hearing as I reach out to people over and over and over is that they are concerned with the rate of taxes going up, and they are afraid that they cannot afford to live here any longer. I would have to say 80% of the phone calls that I've made over the last couple of months, the message is the same. They're concerned with the fact that their taxes have gone up an average of 4.29% every year for the last 15 years. Going on that rate going forward, we're all going to be spending, the average homeowner will be spending over $1,000 a month for taxes, and I know I'm not going to be able to afford that. I know that there are a lot of seniors out there that are concerned that they're just making ends meet, and it did concern me hearing in a recent debate from some of the incumbents that they feel that the level of spending is appropriate and that there are no concerns with the rate of tax increases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in one of the debates I heard a comment that that it was affordable because people are still paying their taxes. And then I heard a comment about we gave back $900,000 worth of free cash to which represented 1/2 of the available free cash that particular year. And free cash, my understanding is that it's money that is up and above the budgeted amount. It's an overpayment of taxes and fees, really.
Essentially,
and the town calls it free cash.
Right, and I don't know, free is a nice word, but I don't think it was free, and I know that most of the residents that I've spoken with are concerned with all the money that's going out the door. The tax bill is not the only pressure that they're seeing. We're all facing increasing insurance costs and increasing food bills, and you know, for the town to say that it's not important to send $70 back for each household because it isn't enough money to be worth it. And I've heard that comment in town meeting. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, I know when the last selectmen were running in candidates, I asked a question about free cash, and I took a $1 bill and I tore it in half and gave each one of them half of it. Would you take and consider giving back half of the free cash if you could in a vote? Would you consider that? And giving back the other half, give half to the town and half back to the taxpayer that paid for it. Would you consider doing that?
I would give this back to you.
Okay, so half. I think it's a very powerful statement to recognize that extra money does belong to the town in a way, and it does belong to the taxpayer ultimately. Oh, I appreciate that. And I kind of caught you flat-footed on that.
Yeah.
Keep that when you're sitting as a selectman to remind yourself that the taxpayers might want some of it back too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Accountability and transparency is one of the topics we always hear. I'm not sure what that means, but as a selectman when you're running? What does that mean to you?
First of all, I see accountability. I'm accountable to every single one of the residents that's out there, whether they voted for me or not. I'm here in a position as a town leader, and I'm accountable for them, their money, and I need to make a decision how it's best to spend. That being said, accountability is making sure that we are properly budgeting and that we're tracking that budget and that we're seeing how we're performing against those goals. And I think the school situation was a time that we realized how easy it is to think that the government is being transparent and accountable, and yet the practices aren't really being followed through. I'd like to see a lot more, again, accountability of these funds that have been set up to maintain our ongoing projects. I would like to see a little better accountability of some of the revolving funds that are going on and not just a once-a-year tie-up.
Yep. I think you appreciate that revolving fund amount. When they talk about $1 million a couple of years ago, I had asked for those amounts, and it seemed like it wasn't something they wanted to share with town meeting or didn't think it was necessary to share with town meeting. I agree with you a lot on that, and I think that came up in a couple of town meetings as well.
And I'd like to see where we're spending our money. I heard in a recent selectmen meeting that one of the selectmen did ask for a comparison on the fire station project as we're coming to a close. How is that project being tracked against what we had originally budgeted? And I'm looking forward to see how that report comes out. I think that something like it's a good practice, and it's something that the private sector does. I think we should
You do
employ
that in your own business. You
exactly.
You debrief after a project. And
That's right. I mean,
you look at what happened. Did we expect it so you can do better next time?
Exactly.
Now, you have goals as if you're elected selectman. You have 2 incumbents running against you, and there are 2 outsiders, if you will, running against the incumbents. Theoretically, you have a lot of signs out. The incumbents kind of run based on the fact that they're already in and they know all this stuff. But what kind of goals do you have if you are elected selectman?
I have 3 main goals. The first, we've talked a lot about the fiscal accountability and slowing the growth of property taxes. Another concern of mine is to actually slow the growth of development in this town so we can maintain and protect our resources. I find that the reason I came to this town is because it really had a small town feel, while it still had a lot of modern amenities. It's very important that as we move forward, we don't try to overbuild Chelmsford in the fear that we don't have enough money to make the next budget. I think that there seems to be a tendency to look at some larger projects these days, and these are the projects that we're having a lot of resistance with the acceptance from the residents. Why? Because they don't want this town to become a city. I don't want this town to become a city, and I think that it's important to maintain the character of Chelmsford in order to maintain the citizens' quality of life.
Yeah, I think that's a hot button. I'm over in Precinct 4 and running for town meeting rep again this year, and Mill Road became an issue where they're putting quite 3 big buildings on top of the cliff overlooking some of the industrial area there, right off Route 129. And it very much looks like all the other intersections if you drive down 93 or up towards Wakefield or into Reading or Andover. They seem like they're putting these housing developments and turning each little corner into a city. So.
And I find, every time we do that, there's a huge impact on the resources of the town. I heard our state senator saying how shocked he was, or the town was, when they put in a project like this, only to find they had a lot more students looking to go to school there, that they hadn't planned for this because they just assumed that single or elderly people would be coming into these apartments and that no one with a family would actually want a two-bedroom apartment. Mm-hmm. You know, these are impacts. You know, every time we put in these projects, we start looking at, do we need a new grinder pump station? How is this going to affect the water resources? I mean, we've been on a water ban now, how many years going on? That is, before we had that water ban, what happened? We had a house burn down because we couldn't have the water pressure to make sure that the fire could be put out. Mm-hmm. And so every time we do this building, we really need to consider, how is this going to affect the quality of all the residents' lives?
Someone described that as the unintended consequences. And
Yeah.
when you build a building on top of a hill, maybe the water pressure is not going to be proper. And when they built 130 Turnpike as a 40B development, put 24 units in, I remember I was at that meeting and they said they argued there would be one extra child in there because it wasn't really designed for children, and I saw 8 waiting for the bus the other day. Just one, you know, just the elementary bus.
I grew up in Shrewsbury, but my parents are from Worcester, and when I was 5 years old, we moved into an apartment like that so that I could go to school and enjoy the benefits of going to school in Shrewsbury. I don't know why it would be a shock to anyone to think that families wouldn't be trying to take advantage of moving out of the city to try to enjoy the beauty of this town.
And if you add 100 apartments, there's arguably 50 more children, and you can do the math. Put $15,000 times 100 times 13 years. Right. That's the impact on the school system. It's a very simple algorithm, from a business point of view. How do you control property taxes? I noticed that the last budget at the Finance Committee showed that our increase this year was, I think for the schools, was arguably 3.5%. I seem to remember 2.5 promises that our taxes will increase 2.5. Well, how could we increase by 3.5% outside of building another 1% worth of properties in town every year? How do you control taxes?
It's a very tough question, and it's one that's faced us every year. One of the numbers that I noticed in the budget was the capital improvement plan, which has gone up 32% since fiscal year 2013. So when you're talking about a 2% increase or 2.5% increase for the taxes, you're talking about 3% for schools. But how do we justify having a 32% increase in our capital spending over the last 3 years?
Mm-hmm. And increases in our budget, we use the euphemism, we have level services. Every year it seems we have level services, but wouldn't it be nice to have level funding? You know, taxpayers look at it and say, wait a minute, level services is a 3.5% increase in my taxes.
Right, and you know, we talk about level services and it has to cost this much money. I don't know whether all the level services that we're providing couldn't be somehow, we could provide some of them more efficiently, so that might be one way to make some gains. There's, you know, at some point, if we don't get control of our spending, we're not going to be looking at providing level services anymore. And somebody's going to have to make some decisions either now or in the future, because our town is facing this problem. All the towns around us are facing this, and it's at a state and federal level too. Mm-hmm.
That's a good springboard for next question about, they call it OPEB, O-P-E-B, which is basically the unfunded liability, the retirement fund for our town employees. And we know that our employees, arguably there's a little less than 1,000 employees, need to retire someday without worrying about having funding for it. But over the years we didn't fund for it, and now we need to put money aside for them, and rightfully so. How do you fund retirement, OPEB.
We are doing what we can at this point at a town level to try to put some money towards it, but obviously this is not sufficient. I know that we are hoping that the state comes in and makes some adjustments to the requirements and somehow alleviates the pressures for our town and other towns like ours. But we are going to have to continue to look at future employees and what their requirements are. So my suggestion would be to bite the bullet and to include their funding in the current budget, so that we are not we are preparing for that.
So in some cases, we might not be able to fund raises as much in looking into the future, and instead fund the retirement program so that those same folks will be comfortable when they retire.
We are going to have to do something, and it is you know, it's a very difficult question. I know that many of us have faced it in the workforce ourselves, not working for the town, but that how do you manage to fund this? And it's becoming increasingly apparent that you do need to be setting aside money every single year in order to properly plan for retirement.
Mm-hmm. And we have some hot topics, if you will, in town. What are the hot topics in town? I mean, performance of town employees at some of our key managers. What do you have some?
I think that our managers are doing a good job trying to make do with the budgets that they have, but also the priorities that they're given. I think that it's a give and take, and they get their direction from the town manager, who takes his direction from the Board of Selectmen. And so at this point, I've spoken with the fire chief. I've find that, you know, I'm looking forward to meeting the new fire chief as well. I'd like to meet with a couple of the other managers, department heads, to see how they're doing kind of on the day-to-day operations. I've met with the town manager and have a much better understanding about how he does his day-to-day, and I think that he does a great job handling the business of the day and coming up with his priorities. So.
Do you have any ideas for controlling, or for, I should say, for increasing town revenues? Have you thought about that?
You know, it's a hot topic, and I've been hearing a lot in the debates about we've got to increase our Chapter 70 funding, we've got to increase our growth of building, or we've got to what's the other one? Find additional taxes, essentially.
State funding. And
essentially state. But from what I heard from our state senator is that at this point, the Chapter 70 funding is pretty much locked down, that he calls it a dead issue in terms of trying to get more funding from us. And while we have leaders in place with that kind of idea about what's going on, we are not going to be getting more money from Chapter 70 funding. Okay. The only way to do it would be to, if the state revenues increase, we will feel the impact of that.
Okay, Laura, I'd like to have you look into the camera and ask the folks for your vote, for their vote.
Hi, thank you for joining us for the last half hour. My name is Laura Merrill, and I'm running for the Chelmsford Board of Selectmen. I respectfully ask for one of your 2 votes on April 7th. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
It's been a pleasure. I really appreciated your time.
I appreciate you coming.
I learned a little bit more. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I'd like to thank the folks watching, and make sure that you vote April 7th, Tuesday, April 7th. Thank you.